Hello, this is Alexis, and today I'm gonna share some tips on how to learn to ride seated. First, I will show you the simplest technique that allow me to start riding seated. Next, I'm gonna take a bit more of a step-by-step approach for the new riders. This will be followed by how to turn and how to brake while seated. And then I'm gonna show you my approach when I encounter speed bumps, potholes while seated as well. And finally, I'm going to show you the new skill that I'm trying to learn, which is backwards seated riding. So without further ado, let's get started. For this tutorial, I'm using a Sherman Max, which is notoriously easy to learn seated riding on. This technique is as follows. Bring your hand onto the front of the wheel at the level of the headlight. Please not onto the wheel itself because it will hurt. Second, push with your hand your body forward, and at the same time, lower your knees and bring your feet onto your tiptoes. Once you got your pelvis aligned in the center of the wheel, then you can sit down. Now, it's easier said than done, obviously, like many things in life, but I'll try to break it down into more steps. That should make it a bit easier. First of all, if you are beginners or fairly beginners, and somehow you have a wheel that it's a small diameter, or you feel quite intimidated by seated riding, try to ride and slowly lower your body. Not to the point that you're sitting, obviously, but try to start riding with a lower center of mass and see how it feels. At the very beginning, by doing that, I experienced wobbles. So it's a good thing to get used to a lower riding position. Take it easy, and gradually, if you're struggling, take your time and keep it safe. 1 centimeter lower at a time is more than enough to start. Make sure you're all padded up and that you practice until you get comfortable to ride in a lower position. Once you've practiced, you can start trying to push yourself forward and bring the toes up and your bottom on the center of the wheel. What it can help, if you have power pads that are on the way, try to assume a duck foot positioning, which means that just before you kneel down, you move your front foot towards the lateral side of the wheel, so the ankle are in contact with the center of the wheel, but the toes are much further out than you're used to. In that way, you can a bit more easily tiptoe even with bulky power pads. Later, when you get more experience and practice, you can then readjustment to accommodate a more comfortable and easier seated position. But for a start, you can try this different foot positioning if it may help. There are a few ways for leg positioning. Some people like to have the knees close to the wheel, so kind of closed. Others prefer to have the knees towards the lateral aspect of the wheel. This is again quite a fairly personal choice on how you want to approach your riding technique. My suggestion is try both ways. Try to keep your knees very close to the front of the wheel and see how it feels to ride like that. And try to feel how to turn in this manner. Next, try to bring your knees away from the wheel and see how it feels to seated ride like that. Personally speaking, I tend to change according to the type of terrain that I'm riding in. Also depends by the type of shoes I'm wearing, by the power pads that I have on at the moment. For instance, if I'm wearing my boots, which are quite bulky, I tend to have my knees away from the wheel because I need to keep my toes away from the power pads so not to get stuck. However, if I'm wearing my sneakers and they're quite thin, I can easily tiptoe on the wheel while seated riding without having to assume duck position, so I can keep the knees closer to the wheel, which personally speaking, it gives me a bit of more control. It makes me feel a bit more in control. The way I turn while I'm seated is I turn my upper body onto the turn. So if I need to turn left, I turn my right shoulder towards the left, and then the wheel automatically turns to the left. Another thing that I do as well to aid the turning radius is I tend to move my internal knee towards the turn itself as well. So again, if I need to turn left, I bring my left knee away from the wheel and towards the turn, so the left side, which increases my turning radius. Whereas I tend to keep my outer leg close to the wheel to keep the balance and keep the control in the seated position. Once you get going on a straight line, you need to practice braking. The way to brake while seated riding is to keep your back straight and lean backwards to shuffle your weight from the middle or the front of the wheel onto the back. It's quite scary, but practice makes perfect. So try at low speeds first, go forward, and slowly lean back. Do it gradually until you get more comfortable with that movement, and then try to go a bit faster and lean backwards a bit more promptly. And in this way, your body will adjust to this movement as well. If you have a roll bar, you can hold on to it while leaning back to get more braking power and therefore brake more efficiently. So basically I'm cheating with the Sherman. In order to master your seated riding, what it can also help could be a high seat. So you can buy, if available, or you can make it yourself with yoga blocks and start with an homemade seat that, yes, it won't be the everyday seat, but it could be a start just to get accustomed to the new way of riding. Bear in mind that the seat should be attached to the wheel, and if it moves or dislodges, you might fall. So make sure it's appropriately positioned and secured onto the wheel. Secondly, what could help is to try and do a bit of exercises to reinforce the legs and get them used to this new movement by doing squats, a few squats. So getting those quadriceps into the necessary strength to perform the squatting maneuver onto the wheel. Once you progress with practice and exercise, then sitting down will become almost second nature. So you will be able to sit down and ride without even the need to hold on to the roll bar if you have it, or to push onto the headlight. You can just lower your body down and it will know where to go. Another consideration, if you're really struggling, you can choose to start seated riding from a stopped position. So you can put one leg onto one pedal and then with the other leg push forward so you get the balance and you start going seated directly without having to adjust the movement from seated to standing and vice versa. Again, this movement might take a bit of practice, so try an approach that is step by step and adjust it to your level of experience and confidence with the wheel. If you are a newbie, take it slow, practice 10-20 minutes per day, but try to practice more repetitive movements rather than trying to do everything in one day. Whereas if you are more experienced, then these movements might take much less to get used to, and seated riding could be easily learned in a day or two. Another suggestion that I could make is what happens when there are speed bumps, potholes, gnarly terrains on the way of seated riding. What shall I do to avoid getting thrown out? Well, on the Sherman it's extremely straightforward and easy because I simply hold onto the roll bar and with my quadriceps I slightly raise my bump and I just use the upper legs and knees to absorb the bump, and once it's done then I can go back seated again. So I basically raise my bum about 5 centimeters, not majorly but just enough that instead of my bottom to absorb the impact and throw me off the wheel, it's actually my knees, quadriceps and lower legs in order to keep the balance. If you're not yet comfortable to do that, just try to practice as much as possible to stand from a seated position as fast as possible, so that if you see that a pothole or a dodgy terrain is coming up, then you can stand up very quickly. At this stage, as you can see here, my challenge for this period is to try and practice seated riding backwards. So I'm trying to lean back as much as I can, and then starting with a few millimeters, which will become centimeters, and eventually meters. So to get used to this new way of riding, to improve my balance train my muscle and gain more control of the wheel overall. It might take me months, it might take me weeks, it might take me years, but consistency is the key. Little by little, give the time to your body to adjust, and at some point it will get there. Don't give up, and if you have any doubts, questions, or opinions, let me know in the comments below. For now, is everything. Ciao ciao!